patch 22 is shaping up to be one of Fallout 76's biggest patches ever, only really behind Wastelanders in terms of scale. I know though, patch 22 doesn't have a concrete release date just yet. As of right now, we just know at some point in September. It did just get posted to Fallout 76's public test server, so many of the features coming with this patch are now available for all Bethesda.net Fallout 76 owners to try out. And there is quite a bit changing around Fallout 76 as a result of this. What'll likely be one of the coolest or most prominent new feature additions we've had in a long time that will almost always be there in the background, but even further, a comprehensive balance overhaul that is almost certainly going to rub some people the wrong way. In this video, I really want to break down some of this new content, go over what exactly it's changing, and give my first impressions of it. Although it is important to remember, this is on the public test server, the patch is still a month or so out, so it is immensely likely we will see some changes to at least some of these features. So if you're unhappy now, it's the time to speak up and give feedback to Bethesda, which is what I'll be doing in this video. But also an important note, this is almost going to be a two-part video. In this part, I'm going to be going over a lot of the content you could play and experience right now in the public test server, but also in the files of the public test server, there are a lot of data mines, a lot of spoilers of what's coming next for this game. I'm going to have a full video out on that tomorrow. Which, speaking of which, something we have in the PTS right now is the new Armor Ace scoreboard. More or less now, you could find that Armor Ace and the Power Patrol will be the Season 2 theme for Fallout 76's challenges. This is going live in patch 22, and on the board right now, you could actually see all of the rewards and where they are slated to go live, but some of them don't have images. Some additional details can be garnered from data mines, so I'm going to push that section of this video until tomorrow. But it's just a disclaimer, this is live right now, although you can't actually claim the rewards. You can complete challenges in Fallout 76's PTS right now. It's just going to give you experience and going to rank you up, but you'll never be able to click the claim button because that is disabled for whatever reason. Let's first take a look at legendary perks because it really has the least number of changes overall with this particular update. We do have the overhauled version of legendary perks in that there are different perk cards from the original incarnation that we saw a couple of months ago now. So all of those newly added perk cards with the previous PTS update now actually do have perk card images on them, and you could scroll through and check all of those out. They do look pretty good. Otherwise, as far as the effects go, it doesn't actually seem like any of these have been edited. If you played the public test server with the most recent perk card update, which was a couple of weeks to a month ago, you'll know all of these. And in general, I would say all of them are pretty strong, pretty solid. I'm definitely way more excited for legendary perks with their most updated version, except the one other change that did come with this is now they made it so when you scrap regular perk cards, you'll get 2 perk card coins instead of 1. You'll unlock slots for legendary perk cards just by leveling up your character. But then if you want to actually upgrade those perk cards, once you have them assigned to a certain slot, it will require 100, 150, and then 200 perk card coins. So in the past, you got 1 perk card coin for each discarded perk card. Now you're going to get 2, which does effectively half the rate at which this grind will take to actually max out all of these legendary card slots. But it is still easily the longest and probably the most ridiculous grind in Fallout 76 right now. Once you unlock all of the perk card slots, or even to just max out one particular perk card slot, will take several hundred levels. And if you want to max them all out, it'll take literally thousands of levels, or a level in the thousands, to actually unlock all of these. It's one of those things where, okay, yes, technically this is a step in the right direction, making it so you get twice as many perk card coins with 2, but it took a insanely long grind and now kind of just turned it into a ridiculously long grind. It's still going to take a really, really long time, almost to the point where it's not even worth grinding unless you're already a super high level. This has been a common point of criticism around this system, so we'll see if Bethesda does respond to the critiques this time, considering we are now approaching release with these with patch 22, but clearly they haven't really listened too heavily in the past, so I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Then we do have daily ops, which is actually a huge new feature addition, and I would say probably my favorite new feature for Fallout 76 in almost a year or so, outside of the Wastelander story content. As far as just singular features that are repeatable and you can consistently do with others, this is amazing. So more or less, the explanation of daily ops is it's going to be rotating dungeons that have unique characteristics that also rotate, but also unique rewards. So the way it'll work is every 24 hours in Fallout 76, a dungeon will be assigned to either the Burrows, the Burning Mine, Valley Galleria, or Vault 94. At that dungeon, you're going to have to currently do the uplink mission. Right now, the uplink mission is the first game mode for daily ops, but reportedly there'll be additional missions in the future. And more or less, the way this mission works is at each of these locations, depending on which day it is and which rotation is current, you have to repair a signal repeater. Then from there, establish an uplink and defend it for a certain amount of time as waves of enemies just come and attack you. The enemies won't actually destroy the signal uplink, but rather, if you're standing in the immediate proximity of the signal uplink, it'll go faster. The process will get multiplied by how many team members you have standing next to it. After you finish the first one, you go to the second one, repeat the same process just in a different location, and then from there at the end you do have a unique boss enemy, which typically is souped up, does more damage, or has some crazy weapons of some kind. In particular, the robot boss enemy actually took advantage of the Automatron DLC and looks pretty awesome. But Bethesda did a couple of really cool things with this one. Firstly, which enemies you are facing will change. So right now you could face either super mutants, blood eagles, or robots. So not only will the actual location of this event rotate each day, but also which type of enemy you'll face will rotate each day. And even further, those enemies will have a unique mutation to them. There are technically 5 mutations in total, but 4 will rotate. Every single time you do a daily op, enemies will have the piercing gaze mutation. More or less, it'll make it so enemies have greater perception, which in effect, all that means is whenever you're doing daily ops, enemies will be able to see you. Sneaking is not practical in this. You can't just hide from enemies. And again, that's always there as a mutation these enemies will have, but the 4 that will rotate are volatile, where enemies will explode on death, active camouflage, where enemies will be cloaked when not attacking, resilient, where enemies can only be killed by a melee attack, and freezing touch, where enemies will freeze players while attacking in close proximity. So to put simply, as you go to do one of these daily ops, you'll find each day it'll be in a different location, one of the 4 options, it'll have one of the 3 different enemy types, and lastly, it'll have one of these 4 different mutations, and these are actually pretty big. I only got to experience thus far the resilient and freezing touch mutations. Freezing touch was obnoxious, but not really the end of the world. It would slow you. Sometimes when you were trying to run to the next uplink, it would get really frustrating or annoying, but it really didn't make a huge difference in gameplay. Resilient, on the other hand, makes it so you totally have to either coordinate or plan with your team to find success here. Because basically, if you are shooting an enemy, they will not die. You'll drop them down till 1 health, but then somebody's gonna have to run up and either hit them with their weapon or use a melee weapon to finish them off. And this can be a nightmare, especially for bloodied builds, if you are doing this against robots because they have armor piercing, and it just becomes very, very frustrating. But one of the other pretty cool parts about daily ops is how they're integrated into the game, because from a lore perspective, more or less the way this works is there's actually a new quest in Fallout 76 to introduce you to these. Now in Watoga, you will be able to find a Brotherhood of Steel member, and in fact, this is the last remaining member of the Appalachian Brotherhood of Steel. That not being the new Brotherhood of Steel that's walking all the way from the West Coast, but rather the one that was here from the original Fallout 76 story.
I'm Initiate Dodge with the Appalachian chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel. I got word that members from Mariposa are on their way here now. It's critical that I lay the groundwork they need to get a foothold in this region.
You can talk to him and you get some background, but more or less he was a deserter after everyone else in his unit or just in the faction overall got wiped out. But now that he heard the West Coast Brotherhood of Steel is making a return, he decided he's going to come back. And to help clean up the area or just establish things in this area, he is offering daily ops to you and other people in Appalachia. So as you're doing the daily op in general, it is Brotherhood of Steel themed. And this more so than most missions, as there actually are very unique UI elements implemented for daily ops. And I could explain them, but I think they kind of speak for themselves. These are pretty cool, and it definitely makes this mission or these dungeons feel quite a bit more unique than past ones. But even further, the really cool part about daily ops are the rewards, and I think this is where Bethesda got things very, very right. So similar to the vault raids of past, daily ops are going to have 3 tiers of rewards, and this is completely determined by how quickly you finish the daily op. So unlike with vault raids, there's no setting you pick as you're starting it. It's just you'll join a daily op and a clock will start, and if you manage to finish things in a certain amount of time, you'll get a higher tier accomplishment. But if you take an hour, let's say, there's no penalty, there's no downside to dying, you'll just respawn in 3 seconds. So unlike with the vault raids where it was very frustrating to kind of immediately lose all your progress, even on this one, if you're shooting for, let's say, the Elder tier, which is the top tier, even if you miss it, it's still good practice and you can still continue playing, which honestly is a lot of fun. And the way this works is there are 3 tiers. The faster you finish it, you'll A, get better rewards in general from the mission, which are represented in the actual on-screen screen UI, which again is totally changed and unique for this mission, but also there are a wide variety of unique rewards from daily ops that you could only get by completing these, and the percent chance of unlocking these rewards does vary depending on which time frame you finish this in. So if you complete a daily op in 16 minutes or less, you get the Initiate tier, which is going to be a 5% drop chance for these rare rewards. If you complete it in 12 minutes or less, it is the Paladin tier, and you have a 10% chance at a rare reward. And then lastly, if you complete it in 8 minutes or less, you're at the Elder tier, and you have an 80% chance at getting a rare reward. This one is definitely kind of balanced appropriately. There were a few times where I was close to 8 minutes, and I could normally get just under, but only if you had a full team. Even further, you can only complete one of those per day. So although you could play the daily ops an unlimited amount of times, you can only complete it as a Paladin, Elder, or Initiate once per day. And even further, it seems like if you do get, let's say, your first run of the day, a sub 8-minute time, you'll automatically complete the Elder, Paladin, and Initiate tier. You can't redo them, or at least that was how it was working in my testing. And to actually complete that, you'll almost certainly have to team up with someone, because again, the way uplink works is the more people standing on the site is the faster the uplink will progress, aka making it save time. But there's even a bit more to this. There are guaranteed legendaries by playing this, and just by completing the daily op overall with a certain amount of time, you will get a legendary drop. As far as which unique rewards you can actually unlock via this, there are a wide variety. I can't really go over all of them just yet. The glaive is a cool unique weapon you could get. There's a Spec Ops outfit, some things around Vault 94, a few posters you can get, a solar panel, a Symptomatic, which is actually a camp item that cures you of all diseases, a variety of bubble turrets you could place at your camp, a reactor you could place at your camp, a Pulaski preservation shelter. And that's really the core of daily ops, but it actually gets a bit cooler because it's just well integrated and it has some unique features around it. One of the main ways you're going to do these is actually with a new daily ops public team. So of course, public teams came out a little while ago for Fallout 76, and now there's a new one around daily ops. If you complete daily ops, you'll get more experience once you have a bond on this public team, but even further, as someone on the public team actually starts a daily op, it'll pop up on your HUD. And there's a whole new section on the HUD for daily ops, and once you highlight this, you could see what today's daily op is, so you could actually see what the characteristics of it are, where it is, what mutations there are. You could see which levels you completed, so if you already completed the Paladin or Initiate tier, or maybe you just haven't gotten Elder yet for the day, you could actually see how long ago it started, and this in particular is really helpful as that's for the day cycle. So once it reaches 24 hours on public servers, it will reset. Although right now for testing purposes on the PTS, this resets every 2 hours. So once you see it say it started 1 hour 50 minutes ago, you'll know, okay, in 10 minutes or so, it's going to change to a different one for the next couple of weeks on the PTS. But also, one of the new features Bethesda is trying out with daily ops that's going to make you absolutely love them depending on your build, they made it so when you kill an enemy with a certain weapon, the enemy will drop ammo from that weapon. And this is actually really, really good, in particular with super mutants. So using my flamer, which typically eats ammo to a ridiculous degree, I actually got more ammo by playing daily ops. I would kill enemies with my flamer in a few shots, but then they would drop like 30 flamer fuel. And just watch this daily op from the start to finish, you'll see I actually end up with significantly more ammo than I started with. And you can apply this to most high rate of fire weapons where you probably have ammo problems. Overall, I absolutely love this feature. I think it's an amazing addition to Fallout 76. It is some of the most fun I've had in this game in a very, very long time, and I really like it because it's something Bethesda can very easily build off of. Just keep adding new variables, add new mutations, add new locations, add new game modes to this. If you're looking for a horde mode, this is pretty close, but even something like a horde mode would be easy to implement with this system. Just a raw, how long can you survive? After a certain point, you maximize all of your rewards, but for bragging rights, maybe you could have some kind of icon that shows, hey, I survived even more rounds than daily ops. And it's definitely a huge upgrade over the vault raids we had in the past. These are a lot more fun and enjoyable, where vault raids were frustrating and things like crashing or lag would kind of ruin the whole run, where in this it doesn't necessarily do that, and you could pretty easily just restart one because again, they don't really take that long. You're not as reliant on time. If someone drops, you might still be able to save it. And overall, I just didn't find daily ops to honestly be all that difficult. Even with a somewhat coordinated team of 2, you could probably get the Elder tier, at least depending on which mutation type enemies have. And if anything, I would actually love to see some harder tiers in the future, like a 6-minute tier would be particularly difficult. Definitely require coordination, but could be cool for those top tier rewards. Also with this, since Vault 94 is implemented into the daily op mix, Vault 94 has been reopened. Now if you just go to the location, you can explore the existing interior. It seems like it is relatively untouched from when we saw it in the past. It's just now you can walk around freely, no time limit, not having to do any missions. And in the patch notes of the PTS, Bethesda also writes, we've added a new no camp zone around Vault 51's exterior in preparation for future content. Bethesda tends to have areas where camps are not allowed to be placed down when there's going to be DLC there. And since I don't really think they're going to be bringing big overhauls to the Battle Royale mode or Vault 51 in general, it'll likely be the opening of Vault 51 in a future update, very similar to what they just did with Vault 94. But then let's look at some of the changes that came just recently with one Wasteland for Vault 76, but also an additional damage overhaul added to the game, because it's kind of hard to talk about one Wasteland and that balance change without looking at this other one. As also in the patch notes, we hear how we've made adjustments to the way damage bonuses are calculated to make the resulting damage from multiple buffs more predictable and allow future improvements. This may result in some changes in damage output for some combinations of buffs. And one of the reasons this is notable is it is an almost comprehensive nerf to just damage output overall in Fallout 76. You can actually see this chart, which is being passed around, wherein people are doing less damage across the board almost regardless of your build with this update. So let's first focus in on what exactly this damage or bonus damage change was. So more or less what Bethesda did was took damage bonuses or modifiers in Fallout 76, and instead of them being multiplicative, they are now additive. So previously, the way it worked was you had your base damage and then you would multiply that times all of your various buffs, whether this was bobbleheads, magazines, your strength, actual mutations, or legendary effects. But now the way this will work is you have your base damage and then it is multiplied plus all of those bonuses added together. So no longer is everything multiplying times each other, but rather all the bonuses are added together then multiplied by your base damage. This makes it so your damage output is a lot more predictable. It's not as confusing or crazy as multiplying several large numbers, but also has the yielding result that if you were stacking insanely high damage multipliers that were making it so you had ridiculous or unachievable damage, you will see a huge hit from this, as big bonuses were hit the hardest from this change. In particular, bloodied builds were affected as a result of this, as it was a huge multiplier. The whole post I'm using as a source on this was written by Xera. I'll have a link to it down below, as well as the Data Miners Discord for more info on it in general, but there are some problems here in that, firstly, it's not actually working that way. What I just explained to you is how this hypothetically should work, but in reality, if you actually look at the in-game numbers and do the math, the outcome numbers are wrong. Bethesda somehow messed up somewhere, and there's some kind of glitch or bug in this where it's actually making it so damage output right now is even lower than it probably should be. But just as a simple and easy comparison, if you actually look at weapons right now in the PTS and compare them to their versions on the live game, you'll see damage is a lot lower. At some points even being half or a quarter of what it was in the past. A quarter mostly in those extreme cases where people are already doing bonkers amounts of damage. With this, there also seems to be some kind of stealth issue where there's now a different damage cap. Some users with stealth rifles were finding that they could only at max do 1/3 of an enemy's health in damage. So no matter how much damage hypothetically they were doing with their weapon, it would always cap out at dealing 3 shots to kill. Although more testing and research has to be done on that. It's still early days. It's really only been 24 hours with this, and we don't exactly have a ton of official sources as to what the changes are. And right now it's hard to tell what exactly is intentional with this and what isn't. Hypothetically, this could be an interesting change in that it's going to lower the damage cap overall in Fallout 76. Like the peak manageable damage is just not as large, which day to day honestly isn't that bad. If you're watching my gameplay in the background, all of this was recorded on the PTS, and I could still take down most enemies pretty quick with a kitted out build, pretty good weapons, but not necessarily god tier. And just taking down most regular enemies, it wasn't a huge issue. I didn't notice a significant shift. Things do get a bit more exaggerated when it comes to boss fights because your damage output over time, your DPS is going to be way lower, and in particular a lot of people have found a lot of frustration around this depending on what your build relied on, and this change could be positive if Bethesda uses it as an opportunity to scale down damage resistances on certain enemies. So if damage output is more predictable and has a more consistent formula, and you could kind of see what the spectrum of damage dealt can be, they can make some changes to damage resistance on the other side when it comes to enemies, and it can make the game more fun overall. You could still deal a ton of damage, and lower levels can also deal damage that is appropriate for them, but right now it's kind of just confusing. There definitely needs to be more time to get through all of this, and I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic in the community in the coming weeks, especially if in its current form it gets live, because again, this is a huge hit to damage output, although no changes have been dealt to damage received via this, so enemies are doing more or less the same amount of damage. Which, speaking speaking of, this kind of transitions us now into one Wasteland. It does feel like in a way it's kind of frustrating that both of these big balance overhauls went live in the same PTS update. It would have been nice to be able to test one and then test the other if the damage update went live in the past iteration of the PTS, so we could flesh that out. And at least right now in the PTS, one Wasteland also seems to be broken. Hypothetically, the way one Wasteland is supposed to work is for each region of Appalachia, enemies will now be more scaled towards your level. So if you're high level but playing in the forest, you could still get enemies that are somewhat of a challenge, not just everything being level 5 and you can one-shot it. Except it seems like for one reason or another, in the Ash Heap, Toxic Valley, and the forest, enemies are capped at level 25. So enemies still are immensely easy to take down, even with the damage nerf, and even with them being much higher level than previously. I was kind of hoping we'd see level 50, 60 enemies. This seems to be an issue. It seems to be some kind of unintentional cap, I think. The PTS was posted on late Friday, so we likely won't hear updates until at least next week. But outside of those regions, it seems like things are actually a lot better, and I think overall this change is positive. As really the big and simple of this is, now as you're clearing through things like West Tech or other popular clear sites and the other 3 regions of Vault 76, previously, when you would see enemies capping out at level 68 or even some regions level 50, you'll now be able to see spawns of level 75 or occasionally level 100 enemies. And although these technically are tougher, again, partially because there was a big nerf, but also because they have higher stats at being a higher level enemy, it also means higher tier loot and more experience for you because the experience is also scaling upwards with their level. And really, they're not that much tougher, although their damage output, their damage resistances might be slightly better than their lower level alternatives. In general, the areas are slightly harder to clear out, but mostly you're just getting more experience and it's roughly the same difficulty to clear out. To me, it doesn't really feel like there's a huge spike in difficulty anywhere, and I honestly prefer this variant with me getting more experience because that's a very grindable resource with the season system, which is only continuing into the future. I didn't get a ton of time to test this out with other lower level players, but hypothetically, that's the other ideal. If you have a friend that's only level 40, the enemies will appear as level 40 or 30 for them, and then level 100 for you, so that can make it fun because you could actually play together and it's not just you're one-shotting everything. I think One Wasteland is one of those things that still needs a few more tweaks. It definitely seems like it's not working totally correct. Even just playing the game right now, it's still relatively rare to find a level 100. It seems mostly to be boss enemies, or one out of every few enemies. Perhaps this is because my character is only level 150, but I've seen reports from even people level 500 encountering similar things, where I would think if you're in the Cranberry Bog, which is meant to be the most difficult area, you should see every enemy being level 100 if you're 5 times that level. Either way though, my initial impressions, the added bonuses definitely account for the additional challenge we can see here. So yeah, overall, patch 22 is shaping up to be a massive one. It's going to bring a lot of change to Appalachia, especially as some of these planned changes do go live. It'll be interesting to see what kind of edits come to some of these things, probably fixes to potentially broken features as they exist right now, like enemies not appropriately scaling in certain regions. But I think if they get rid of some of those bugs, and although the damage nerf may be frustrating to people, this will be a huge hit of a patch. I'm actually really looking forward to playing more of this on live servers, as from time to time the PTS doesn't really have a lot of players on it. Again, tomorrow I'm going to have another video looking more in depth at some of those season's rewards, as well as Steel Dawn overall. Apparently Steel Dawn's coming in patch 22. Right now it's not open for testing, but that might just be for spoiler sake, although I will have spoilers in that video. But in general, I hope you guys found this one informative or interesting, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.